Alright, today's video is a special one for me, and I bet it is for you too, because today we're diving into the complete history of Ben 10, easily one of the best, if not the best, Cartoon Network series ever made. We're covering everything from the classic Ben 10 to Alien Force, Ultimate Alien, Omniverse, and unfortunately, the reboot. Yeah, I know. The reboot is trash compared to the rest, but I have to cover it too. We're here to break down everything about this incredibly well-built and fascinating universe. And if you feel the urge to unleash your fury on the reboot, the comment section is wide open. Go ahead, roast it, list its flaws, do what you gotta do. Now, the story of Ben 10 begins with some weird-looking watch flies out of nowhere, latches onto some random kid's arm, and boom, he gets superpowers. Cliche. And just like that, he's Ben 10. But let's get away from the absolute banger of intro song before I start humming it all day, and let's break down the classic series. Okay, like every kid in 2010, the first time I saw this on Cartoon Network, I was blown away by how good it was. We meet Ben, a cocky, reckless 10-year-old kid who's about to spend the summer traveling with his suspiciously experienced grandpa, who lives in an RV, along with his cousin Gwen, who he does not get along with. At first, they both hate the idea of road tripping across the country with Grandpa, but things take a turn when Ben, wandering through the woods, stumbles upon something insane.
Looks like a satellite or something.
Meanwhile, somewhere in deep space, a psycho green alien is out here blasting at another ship. That psycho, none other than Vilgax, a beast of a villain who will stop at nothing to get his hands on the Omnitrix. But mid-battle, things go south, and the Omnitrix gets flung to Earth, landing right on Ben's wrist. And guess what? It's not coming off. The moment Ben realizes what this watch can do, he does exactly what a 10-year-old with ultimate power would do: cause absolute chaos. He burns down half the forest, by accident of course, and in the moment of true government level genius, he tries to put out the fire by setting more things on fire. Bruh. Thankfully, Grandpa Max helps get things under control while also fighting off some Vilgax drones. This is where we get our first taste of just how buggy and unreliable the Omnitrix is. I'm starting to think that the battery used in the Omnitrix was made by Apple and is completely unpredictable, and who knows if it even has a battery. But here's the deal. Ben now has a power to transform into 10 different aliens, and what was supposed to be a boring summer road trip turns into an epic cross-country adventure with Ben fighting crime and becoming an actual hero. And with that, we get iconic villains like Dr. Animal, who mutates animals into monsters. My biggest gripe with this guy, dude is a literal genius. He figured out how to bring prehistoric creatures back to life, and instead of, I don't know, winning a Nobel Prize or opening a Jurassic Park, he decides to be a broke supervillain committing petty crimes. It's like those classic villains who want to destroy their planet, but conveniently forget that they live on a planet too. Speaking of destruction, Vilgax sends a whole hit squad after Ben, including a guy from the same species as Diamond Head. Not that it matters much, because Ben, along with his friendly Diamond Alien, absolutely wrecks them.
Fits my style.
Then we meet Kevin, a delinquent kid with the power to absorb energy. And no, not like modern teenagers who just absorb their parents' money. Kevin is actually on his own, and when he teams up with Ben, who's not exactly a genius himself, they end up causing all kinds of trouble. But when Kevin starts going full supervillain, Ben has to step up as a hero, because, you know, he's only interested in committing light crimes. Nothing that could actually get him jailed. At one point, Kevin absorbs one of Ben's aliens, and even tries to steal the Omnitrix. But the watch literally fights back, launching him away with a force field. 1 point for the Omnitrix, 0 for Ben. Later on, we actually see Ben mature as a character. When Grandpa Max gets injured, Ben, fearing for his safety and Gwen's, chooses to leave them behind. It's one of those moments that shows the brilliance of the series. Ben is still just a kid, but he has enough self-awareness to make tough decisions. Of course, things take a turn when he finally faces off against Vilgax, who, after healing up, is done sending interns to do his job. After an epic battle, Ben barely manages to hold him off, and Grandpa Max finally reveals his huge secret. Turns out, Max isn't just some weird old guy who eats questionable food. He's a high-ranking member of an intergalactic police force called the Plumbers. Yes, they are called the Plumbers. No, they do not fix cosmic toilets. Terrible name, amazing organization.
Doesn't make sense.
And back in the day, Max actually fought and defeated Vilgax himself. But even with all this experience, Vilgax still gets the upper hand, forcing Ben to choose between saving himself or saving Gwen and Grandpa Max. Ben surrenders, but not really. He quickly outsmarts Vilgax, transforms into a heat blast, and blows up Vilgax's ship in the process.
Not bad for a doofus.
Grandpa, We need to talk.
And so on, the summer continues, filled with more hero work and new alien transformations, including Cannonball, a rolling wrecking ball of destruction. At one point, Ben even faces an evil version of Heat Blast. But surprise, it's actually Kevin, who absorbed too much of the Omnitrix energy. A wild battle ensues, ending with Kevin getting thrown into a river. And no, he's not dead. Instead, he mutates into a monstrous fusion of all Ben's aliens and gets abducted into an alien gladiator arena, which, by the way, is one of the best episodes ever. Forced to fight for survival, Ben and Kevin reluctantly team up. But as expected, Kevin betrays him the second he gets the chance. Thankfully, another alien Ben helped earlier saves him, and Kevin gets left floating alone in space. Back on Earth, Ben continues saving the day, this time unlocking Wildvine, a plant-based alien with insane abilities. And let's not forget Gwen. Remember how she wore off magic forever? Well, she finds another magical artifact. And guess who comes back? Hex, the evil magician, along with his niece, Charmcaster, who, let's be honest, is weirdly attractive for a cartoon villain.
Yeah, boy.
Gwen gets her moment of shine, actually wielding Hex's staff, which should only work for a true magic master. But moving on, Kevin returns, and so does Vilgax, forming a terrifying team-up against Ben. Things get so bad that Grandpa Max banishes them to the New Void, a nightmarish alternate dimension. Unfortunately, Ben gets sucked into. Gwen, being the absolute MVP, breaks into the New Void to rescue Ben. And in a final twist, Kevin and Vilgax start fighting each other over the Omnitrix. Gwen, using her big brain energy, tricks them, snatches the Omnitrix back. And then, as always, Vilgax gets blown up again. But hold on, because now we're getting to the best episode of the entire series. Ben 10,000. Yes, in this future timeline, future Gwen, who now has full-on magic powers, takes the kid to the future, and that's where we meet Ben 10,000, the most powerful hero in the entire universe. And let's be real, this version of Ben is El Macho compared to the reboot's future Ben, who looks like a complete downgrade. This is why classic Ben 10 will always have a special place in our hearts. Back to the future, Ben and company fight future villains, including, surprise surprise, Vilgax. And guess what? By the end of the episode, he doesn't even explode this time. Instead, he gets frozen. Honestly, that's a big improvement for Vilgax. He's finally not spending millions of Tetanites just to rebuild himself from scratch. But let's be real, he probably only did this to give future Ben a break before coming back with yet another evil plan. Back in the present, the Tennyson family keeps taking down a bunch of villains that honestly don't matter much. Meanwhile, Ben keeps collecting new alien DNA, and the show starts taking a lot of inspiration from classic horror monster stories. And let's not forget, Gwen keeps leveling up her magic skills, slowly learning more and more spells from her magic book, even though she struggles at times. Then, a mysterious alien woman shows up looking for the Omnitrix. And this is where we learn something shocking about Grandpa Max. Turns out, this guy will literally eat anything, including food from this alien woman, who also happens to be his ex-girlfriend. Yeah, you heard that right. Grandpa Max dated an alien. And remember that battle in episode 1 where some alien was fighting Vilgax in space? That was her. She reveals that her original plan was to give the Omnitrix to Grandpa Max, because he's literally the greatest plumber of all time. But as we all know, that plan didn't work out, and despite her initial doubts, she eventually realizes that Ben is actually a true hero. To prove it, she even unlocks a new alien for him. And what's the power of this new alien? Eating. Yep, must be a tribute to Grandpa Max. You know what I mean? Before leaving, she invites Max to travel the universe with her, but of course, he stays behind to protect the kids. At this point, we also learned that for Grandpa Max, Area 51 isn't some top secret government facility. It's basically a brothel. Moving on, Ben unlocks another new alien, Ditto, a cloning alien. Meanwhile, Gwen continues leveling up her magic, and now we've reached the final stretch. A bunch of past feelings that Grandpa Max and the crew defeated decided to team up and form a group called the Negative 10. The leader of this group, a former plumber who was kicked out for stealing alien technology and using it for personal gain. Their goal, to steal a super powerful plumber artifact. It's a tough battle, but in the end, Max and the crew pull through and win. And finally, we reach the last episode of the series. Summer vacation ends, everything goes back to normal, and Ben returns home, including returning to his loser life at school. But just when he thinks he's getting a break, Vilgax shows up and blows his entire house. Yup, this guy's committed to ruining Ben's life. Of course, Ben and his family fight back, defeat Vilgax again, and guess what? They blow him up again. At this point, how many times has this guy exploded? 10? 20? I've lost count. Vilgax is basically the Empire from Star Wars. Never changes his plans, constantly gets blown up, and always comes back to start from scratch. But here's the thing, this episode isn't canon. Now, let's do a quick recap of the real finale, the secret of the Omnitrix. This is the actual ending of the series, and it's a big one. The Omnitrix malfunctions and goes into self-destruct mode, which means that if Ben doesn't fix it, the entire universe will be wiped out. Enter Tetrax, aka that other Diamond Head guy who takes Ben on a mission to find Azimuth, the creator of the Omnitrix. And guess who shows up again? Don't even gotta say it no more. Yep, Mr. Explosion himself, Vilgax. At this point, I don't even know how he's still alive. But here we are. Azimuth, being the grumpy genius that he is, takes one look at Ben and immediately roasts him, calling him an idiot for misusing the Omnitrix. But in the end, he helps fix the device, unlocks a giant new alien, and Ben proceeds to beat the absolute crap out of everyone, including Vilgax, who for once doesn't get blown up. And that, my friends, is how the original Ben 10 series ends. Now, let's talk about the best version of Ben 10, which, in my opinion, surpasses the original. And compared to the reboot, well, let's just say they didn't exactly show much respect for the classic. I mean, come on, making Kevin a kid genius who builds his own Omnitrix? That's pushing it. Moving on to the story, Ben is now 15 and has taken off the Omnitrix to live a normal life. That is, until one day, an alien shows up and attacks him at Grandpa Mac's love nest. Yeah, we all know Max gets around the universe. Ben handles the situation like a pro, but quickly realizes something's wrong. Grandpa Max is missing. So he heads over to see Gwen, who, in this version, is basically just Ben with different hair and some lipstick. They have a little debate about whether or not he should put on the Omnitrix back on. That's when they get attacked by a fish-faced alien. But plot twist, he's not a bad guy. He's actually a plumber and was working with Max on a case before he vanished. This convinces Ben to use his Omnitrix again, and together, they set off to find the most womanizing old man in the galaxy. In their search, they come across Kevin, who's now dealing alien tech to the Forever Knights. And guess what? The aliens that attacked Ben earlier, they're here too. But when it's time to throw down, Ben's Omnitrix malfunctions, leaving Gwen and the fish guy to handle the situation. And yeah, they're losing badly. Then out of nowhere, the Omnitrix gets a crazy upgrade, giving Ben 10 new aliens. The first one he uses, Swamp Fire, a cool mix of plant-based regeneration and fiery attacks. Some bad guys manage to escape, and since they didn't pay Kevin, he decides to tag along. But unlike the classic series, where no one ever really died because it was a kid's show, surprise, fish guy doesn't make it. In the end, Ben defeats everyone using his new powers. And in space, he transforms into Humongosaurus. Get used to him, because he'll be showing up a lot. Then, we meet the big boss of the alien enemies, members of a species that sees itself as superior to all others. With their new trio formed, they use the fish guy's plumber badge to track down suspicious alien activity. But the alien they find is being hunted by a sheriff who thinks he's the one destroying farms in the area. Turns out, the real culprits are the DNA aliens, the same creatures from before. Naturally, the good guys managed to take them down.
What happened?
Alan defeated the aliens, destroyed their weather machine, then used his heat powers to free everyone from suspended animation.
We helped.
After a few more misadventures, they receive a message from Grandpa Max, telling them to gather the children of plumbers, because they're gonna need all the help they can get. So basically, it's time to assemble the Avengers, Plumber Edition. Their journey continues, and eventually, Grandpa Max reappears, fighting the DNA aliens alongside his grandson, who is now partially under their control. That's when we learn that the Omnitrix has the power to cure infected aliens. Oh, and the DNA aliens' grand plan? To take over the world just like they did to Gwen's brother. But in the end, Max sacrifices himself, getting trapped in a no void along with a bunch of these aliens. Ben heads back home, and, inspired by everything his grandpa taught him, finally works up the courage to ask a girl out. But of course, he immediately gets attacked. Turns out, the evil upgrade was just a cute little alien pet. Not long after, we meet Verdona, the alien grandma of the Tennysons. And yes, Grandpa Max really has a thing for intergalactic romance. She wants Gwen to fully embrace either her alien or human side, but Gwen chooses to stay human.
I like my powers, but I love my friends and family.
More adventure follows, including a run with a frog-like alien claiming to be the daughter of a galactic emperor. But surprise, she was just playing them. In the end, Ben sorting things out, transforming into a celestial sapien, but then the girl gets kidnapped again, and Ben finds himself stuck with Bellicus and Serena, the two voices who control Alien X. To get Alien X to move, he needs their permission, but since Ben isn't exactly the best negotiator, the Emperor makes a deal with the kidnappers and decides that, oh yeah, Earth is doomed. Luckily, things work out in the end. Meanwhile, a plumber shows up, telling them they can't just go around acting like plumbers without consequences, unless they want a one-way ticket to the no void. Then, the hybrid leader arrives just as the team is under attack. They all get captured, but Gwen manages to save them. The plumber guy sees potential and decides to officially make them plumbers. Later, Gwen and Kevin ask Ben if he's been busy taking down the Forever Knights. Ben denies it, saying he was just studying with Julie. But surprise, it's not Ben, it's Albedo, an alien from Azimuth's species, who got stuck in Ben's form and tried to trick everyone by claiming to be the true creator of the Omnitrix. But of course, that doesn't fly. especially when Azimuth himself shows up, takes the watch back from Albedo, and warns Ben to brace himself, because things are only going to get tougher from here. Now, let's talk about an episode I was going to skip, but I just have to mention. So, Ben starts acting weird whenever he transforms into Big Chill. By the end of the episode, yeah, you guessed it, Ben was pregnant. Nah, I did not guess that. And I know you did not guess that too. That's right, Big Chill had babies. Meanwhile, one of his newborn upgrade babies gets kidnapped by the Forever Knights, who plan to use it as a weapon, but with Ben and Julie's help, they rescue the little guy. The story continues, and another hybrid leader shows up, leading to a big fight. But this time, Ben's parents find out about his double life. Naturally, they ground him, and naturally, he immediately sneaks out to go destroy more stuff and save Kevin. But in a surprise twist, his parents actually step in to help him. Sometime later, Gwen receives a message from an alien asking for help. Turns out, the one causing chaos in that dimension is none other than Dr. Animal. Except now, he's stronger than ever and goes by the Annihilator. In this dimension, he has a big enemy named Alley Cat, who turns out to be Max. He explained that he wanted to go home, but after seeing how the people in this place were suffering, he decided to stay and lead a rebellion against the Annihilator's rules. In the end, they defeat Animal. Max chooses to stay behind to protect the locals.
I can't lose you again.
Never happen. We'll find our way back when our work is done here. And besides, I'm always with you.
Back on Earth, we learned that the DNA aliens are building a portal to bring the hybrid army to our world. And to make things worse, we find out that Azimuth's home planet was already destroyed by them. That's when Professor Paradox shows up, along with Azimuth himself, to warn Ben that the Earth is next on their hit list. Realizing how bad things are about to get, they decide to recruit every ally they've made so far. Azimuth then has a serious talk with Ben. He tells him that if this war is lost, humanity is finished. He also says Ben isn't ready yet, but regardless, it's time for him to know the truth about the Omnitrix. Azimuth reveals that the watch's true purpose isn't just transformation, it's a safeguard for endangered species. If an entire race is wiped out, Ben can use the Omnitrix to bring them back. It's basically Noah's Ark, and Ben, he's Noah. But if Ben dies in battle, all hope is lost. That's why Azimuth forbids him from fighting. Ben, of course, refuses to sit this one out, so Azimuth does the unthinkable. He grants Ben full control of the Omnitrix. Now, it's time for the final battle. After an all-out brawl, Grandpa Max and his reinforcements arrive. They finally come face to face with the hybrid leaders, except they're in bad shape. Turns out, their obsession with keeping their DNA pure has backfired. They've become weak, infertile, and on the verge of extinction. So their grand plan? Destroy every other species since they can't continue their own. But Ben uses the Omnitrix to cure the hybrid, and it works. However, they're furious. They're no longer pure, and they'd probably continue their war if not for one of their own. Now cured, stepping up and offering them a new path. He takes over as their new leader, guiding them towards a better future. And just like that, the war is over. Grandpa Max becomes the mentor of a new generation of plumbers, and everyone goes back home. The Omnitrix resets once again. And technically, after this, we hit the live-action movies. But we're skipping those and sticking to the animated series. Guess who's back? That's right, the most beloved exploded villain of all time, Vilgax. But unlike a classic series, he's not as terrifying anymore. Sure, he's stronger than ever and completely wrecks everyone, but instead of finishing the job, he just leaves. He warns Ben that he'll be back for a one-on-one duel to decide who rules the world. A lot of people consider this season one of the weakest, and a major reason for that, Ben's personality shift. Unlike seasons 1 and 2, where he had solid character growth, here he becomes dumber and more arrogant. Basically, saving the entire universe went straight to his head. Another big problem, there's no main story arc. In previous seasons, the hybrid war tied everything together, but now it's just random episodes. At one point, Kevin tries to upgrade the Omnitrix, but it backfires hard. He mutates into a monster, and a bunch of aliens escape from the watch. Ben eventually tracks them all down and prepares to fight Vilgax, but when the final showdown happens, Vilgax loses way too fast. It's pretty underwhelming, considering how powerful he was built up to be. The story continues, and Ben unlocks a new alien, Lodestar. He also gets caught in a war on an alien planet and faces an unexpected enemy, Enchantress. Yup, the most beautiful and dangerous sorceress is back, and she's out for revenge. She brainwashes Kevin into attacking his friends, but Gwen takes her down and banishes her to another dimension. Sometime later, Vilgax returns and tries to team up with Ghost Freak, but surprise, Ghost Freak betrays him and starts consuming his planet. Vilgax tries to stop him, but fails. Omnitrix. So he does something unthinkable. He asks Ben for help. This is when we see that Vilgax actually cares about his people. Ben captures Ghost Freak but ends up getting possessed by him. In the end, Vilgax helps Ben regain control and finally defeats the entity. Meanwhile, Kevin, still stuck in his monster's form, teams up with a sorcerer to find an artifact that can cure him. It works, but at the cost of his powers. Unfortunately, that same sorcerer later returns and tries to steal Gwen's life force. Kevin fights back, but in the process, he's forced to mutate again. One day, the gang takes a beach trip, but an alien appears and hands them a baby. Their mission, escorted to another planet as a symbol of peace. Simple, right? Wrong. The baby transforms Ben into a rage-fueled monster, and he loses control. After dealing with a ton of enemies, they finally deliver the baby. And what do its parents do? They eat it. Ben, furious, jumps inside the creature's stomach and cusses out the alien, its family, and everyone involved before finishing his mission. In another episode, Asma takes back the Omnitrix to personally battle Vilgax. He loses, badly. Vilgax finally gets his hands on the Omnitrix, but Ben steals it back and takes him down in a giant form. Later, Gwen tries to travel back in time to prevent Kevin from mutating. She succeeds, but in doing so, she ruins everything. The world ends up in ruins. Kevin is Enchantress slave. Ben is a prisoner, and Gwen dead. Realizing her mistake, she undoes the change and restores the timeline. Then, Ben attacks the new plumber recruits, but it turns out to be a test set up by Grandpa Max. Later, a prisoner escapes, and we learn he's an old enemy of Max, one that was captured at the cost of Kevin's father's life. Fueled by revenge, Kevin kills him, ignoring his pleas for mercy. Albedo seals a piece of the Omnitrix and teams up with Vilgax. This time, their plan actually works. They take down Gwen and Kevin, but when they try to capture Grandpa Max, he smacks Albedo in the head with a frying pan. Yeah, Max is still a legend. Ben fights Albedo, but this time, his rival has an Ultimatrix, allowing him to evolve his aliens. Ben is forced to surrender his Omnitrix to Vilgax. Everything seems lost, but Grandpa Max goes full Rambo mode, blasting everything in sight. Gwen teleports the team away, and Vilgax betrays Albedo, turning his entire army into Humongosaurus. Meanwhile, Ben falls into despair. Without the Omnitrix, he feels useless. Azimuth appears, saying the watch was never meant for Ben. It should have been Max's responsibility. But after seeing everything Ben has accomplished, he realizes Ben has exceeded all expectations. Motivated again, Ben and his friends infiltrate Vilgax's ship. Using a voice command, Ben self-destructs the Omnitrix. Kevin reverts to normal. Gwen and Kevin share a kiss. And finally, Ben and Vilgax have one last fight. Ben takes Albedo's Ultimatrix, they crash into the ocean, and Vilgax unveils his true form. As the dust settles, Ben's family celebrate the victory. And just like that, the legend continues. Now, let's talk about Ben 10 Ultimate Alien. After the original Ultimatrix was destroyed, Ben gets his hand on an upgraded version from Albedo, a more advanced model capable of unlocking even stronger aliens. And of course, these new forms are put to the ultimate test in the worst possible scenario. With the help of Gwen and Kevin, Ben continues his work as a plumber. But now, he's not just any hero, he's a full-blown celebrity. Some people see him as a savior, while others think he's a ticking time bomb. And speaking of changes, remember how Gwen was an absolute powerhouse in Alien Force? Well, an ultimate alien, apparently, she's scared of her strength. Yeah, go figure. Meanwhile, Ben is suddenly embarrassed about dating Julie, but at least Kevin is still going strong, treating relationship the same way he treats his car collection. At the start of the series, the team deals with some familiar secondary villains. The Forever Knights, Zambozo from the classic Ben 10, Dr. Animal, and of course, our personal favorite, the Queen herself, Heather.
Vitalis Eruptor!
These villains team up thinking they can take down Ben and his crew. But as soon as Gwen taps into her alien form, she scares them all off. Classic. Things get more interesting when we meet Agrigor, an unfriendly alien who captures 5 other aliens with the goal of absorbing their abilities and becoming even stronger. And get this, he's from the same species as Kevin. Fortunately, the captured aliens manage to escape and crash land on Earth. Ben scans their DNA and with the team's help, starts working on sending them back home. But, surprise, Agrigor was one step ahead. Instead of actually making it back, the aliens are intercepted and captured once again. Yeah, Ben and the gang got played. One of the aliens, thinking Ben was in on it, attacks him, but after a quick chase, where Ben transforms into Jet Ray, they clear up the misunderstanding, and the aliens flee. The only reason they survive is because one of the captured aliens willingly surrenders to Agrigor. Later, the biggest legend in the galaxy, Grandpa Max, arrives and warns them that Agrigor is becoming a major problem for the plumbers. They team up to stop him. But once again, it's no use. Agrigor successfully absorbs the DNA of all 5 aliens. After completely wiping the floor with the team, Agrigor just leaves. You know, instead of finishing them off when he had the chance, classic villain mistake. Not long after, Asma shows up just to roast Ben again, and reveals that Agrigor's plan all along was to collect a legendary artifact known as the Map of Infinity. This map allows its user to travel anywhere in the universe and across dimensions. And why does he want it? To reach the Forge of Creation. Since the map is obviously too powerful, Professor Paradox split it into 4 pieces and head them across the galaxy. Now, it's up to Ben's team to find those pieces before Agrigor does. Unfortunately, Grandpa Max is too injured to join them. During their search, they face an army of Necro-Phrygians. But just as they're about to claim a piece of the map, Agrigor swoops in, takes it, and leaves again. Later, with the help of a member of Ripjaw's species, they attempt to stop Agrigor from claiming another relic from an underwater world. But, big shock, they fail. Agrigor, once again, refuses to finish them off and escapes through a magical portal. At this point, they realize they need extra firepower, so they call in Heather. They end up fighting a sorcerer who, by the way, was responsible for Heather's father's death. After a tough battle, they take him down. But of course, Agrigor gets another piece of the map. Heather chooses to stay behind to protect her people, while the team continues searching for the last piece. This final piece is hidden in a massive cube-like labyrinth built by the Professor Paradox himself. After making their way through a series of deadly traps, they finally get their hands on it, only for Agrigor to show up, take it, and say, "Appreciate it, guys," before leaving. At this point, Ben is out of options. His only choice is to transform into Alien X, but once again, Bellicus and Serena refuse to help him. And to make things worse, Asmus shows up just to roast Ben even more, saying he was never truly worthy of the Omnitrix. Then, Paradox appears and explains that Agrigor's real goal isn't just reaching the Forge of Creation. It turns out that a celestial sapiens, Alien X species, are born there. Agrigor wants to absorb the DNA of a celestial sapien infant, making himself literally omnipotent. With no time to waste, the team follows into another galaxy, where they end up running into Kid Ben from the past, because, of course, time travel. After tons of effort, they finally reach the celestial sapien city. And let's be real, if Grandpa Max saw some of those alien ladies, he'd probably want to spend his whole retirement fund there.
Oh yeah, it's all coming together.
But back to the action. Agrigor arrives, and the final battle begins. After an intense fight where most of the team gets taken down, Kevin makes a desperate decision. He absorbs the Ultimatrix power and transforms into Monster Kevin once again. In this new form, Kevin absolutely destroys Agrigor and absorbs his power, becoming insanely strong, but also completely unhinged. Realizing he's losing his mind, he escapes before the team can stop him. And let's be honest, Agrigor basically lost because he was too dumb. He had so many chances to eliminate everyone, but just didn't. Now, remember when Kevin was locked up in a Novoid? A prisoner there helped him learn to control his powers and escape, but it cost him his life. That's why Kevin is out for revenge. When he finally has a chance to settle the score, Ben and Gwen stop him, but that's not the end of it. Kevin also tries to kill Radith, only to be stopped again by his friends. At this point, Kevin starts absorbing powers from multiple beings, losing himself completely. Then now faces a brutal dilemma: take down Kevin or let him keep spiraling into madness. And Gwen, she refuses to let Ben hurt him. And honestly, this whole arc is way better than Agrigor's. The moral struggle of choosing between saving a friend or saving the world adds a much darker tone to the story. Gwen decides to ask an old enemy for help. At first, the guy refuses, but then Gwen offers him a year's worth of magical energy, and suddenly, he's interested. The wizard reveals that there's an artifact capable of curing Kevin, but there's a catch: it's broken. So, the team turns to Cooper for help. Who, by the way, has gone from nerdy tech guy to absolute unit. Fixing the artifact takes time, so Grandpa Max steps up and holds Kevin off for as long as he can. Then it's Ben's turn, and when we all see fails, Gwen is their last line of defense. But just when things look grim, Julie shows up with Upgrade's help, and together, they give it their all. In the end, just when Kevin is about to win, then goes against Gwen's order and fights Kevin at full power. No holding back, but Gwen manages to convince him that this isn't the way, and together, they bring Kevin back to his normal self. Of course, the wizard ends up absorbing all of Kevin's corrupted energy, which, let's be real, was bound to make him a problem later. Fortunately, the team was very prepared for this, and takes him down way too easily. Oh, and as a bonus, the 5 aliens Agrigor absorbed are finally freed. With Kevin back to normal, everyone makes amends, and the team's adventure continue. From this point, we get a bunch of standalone episodes that don't really connect to each other. They're fun, but there's no real overarching plot. So, let's speed run through them. First, we meet a blonde girl named Eunice, who has no memory of who she is. Then, of course, immediately starts flirting with her. Turns out, she's a clone, so yeah, that doesn't go anywhere. Then, a plant monster crash lands on Earth, captures most of the team, and creates evil clones of them. In the end, it's defeated because it's allergic to peanuts. Yep. Next up, we meet Gwen's cousin, who basically is evil Gwen, except she's also an alien and probably stronger than the real Gwen. She thinks Earth is weak, so she tries to reshape it into her ideal home, where she can live happily with her boyfriend. So she absolutely destroys the team until Gwen's grandmother shows up and wrecks her. And that's when we finally see the true power of an Anodai. After that, we get a not so great episode where the heroes are forced to enroll in a plumber academy.
Sounds like a thank you to me.
Then we meet yet another version of Ben from the future, but this one is actually interesting because he can transform without physically changing his form. His enemy, a time-traveling villain from the future, who decides to go back in time and take out Ben when he's still weak. Turns out, this villain's actually another Ben, one who wanted to absorb the powers of every Ben in existence. Of course, he ends up getting defeated. Now, for a bit of backstory, there's an episode about how Grandpa Max met Verdona. Apparently, he saved her from an evil robot in the past, and, as a reward, got exactly what he wanted most. And no, they don't tell us what he was. So, get your ass back to the video.
Yeah, boy.
Then we meet Sir George, the first of the Forever Knight. His whole mission is to purge Earth of aliens, and Ben challenges him to a duel. If Ben loses, all aliens must leave. If he wins, they stay. Ben wins. Sir George then says he'll be back, because his mission's far more important than this. Later, Albedo returns from another fight with Ben, but ends up reverting to his original form. It doesn't take long for him to turn human again, though. Then, we get a bizarre episode where Ben gets trapped inside the Ultimatrix. There, he's haunted by his own ultimate aliens, who want to kill him so they can escape from the Watch. In classic Ben fashion, he decides to sacrifice himself to save them.
I have to die.
Instead of dying, though, the Ultimatrix upgrades itself, and Azmet relocates the ultimate aliens somewhere safe. And then, Vilgax is back. Apparently he was captured and kept in a freak show circus, but a cult that worships him as a god breaks him out, because of course they do. Bad idea. Vilgax unleashes an ancient monster named Diagon, and this thing is bad news. Right on cue, Sir George returns. Turns out, his real mission is to destroy Diagon once and for all. To do that, he wields Azmet's sword, and this sword, it's basically Thor's hammer, only someone worthy can use it. This is where we learn more about Azmet's past. Turns out, this sword is so powerful that it destroyed an entire planet, and the guilt from creating it is one of the reasons why Azmet invented the Omnitrix, to make up for the destruction his weapon caused. He originally gave the sword to Sir George, who once used it to defeat Diagon, but thanks to Vilgax, Diagon is back. The catch, if someone unworthy wields the sword, the entire planet will be destroyed. Sir George insists he's the only one who can finish this job. Azmet disagrees, saying he'll fail this time and only bring more destruction. So Ben steps in and makes a deal. If one of them falls, the other will take up the sword and end it. Before heading into battle, they stop by to check on Heather, who, surprise, has become a full-blown dictator. She's been stealing people's souls in an attempt to bring back her father. It almost works, but her father refuses, and all the souls return to their bodies. Then comes the final showdown. Diagon sends Vilgax as his first line of defense. Sir George fights him with the teams out, but Diagon decides Vilgax is too weak and possesses the strongest being around, Gwen. Kevin manages to free her, but then it's too late. Diagon has reached Earth. Now, it's Ultimate Way Big versus Diagon in the Battle of Titans. But in the middle of the fight, Sir George dies. Then Vilgax, ever the opportunist, decides Diagon isn't taking over the universe, because he is. Using a special weapon, Vilgax absorbs all of Diagon's power, and now, with no one left to stop him, he plans to wipe out the last remaining threats, Ben and his team. But Ben, using Azmet's sword, defeats him, because, of course, the guy who's never used to the sword before somehow succeeds where Sir George failed. Then nearly gets corrupted by the sword's power, but Gwen, Julie, and Kevin remind him what truly matters: love. In the end, Azmet takes back the sword, removes the Ultimatrix, and upgrades Ben to the most powerful Omnitrix yet.
I don't suppose you'd consider giving me the Master Control.
Perhaps for your 18th birthday.
Now, let's really analyze Ultimate Alien. Unlike Alien Force and the classic series, many arcs in Ultimate Aliens are resolved way too easily. The Diagon and Heather storylines had so much potential but were wrapped up with barely any effort. And let's be honest, poorly developed villains like Agrigor and this version of Vilgax just don't hit the same as the hybrid or classic Vilgax. This brings up an interesting point. What if we got an adult Ben 10 series? One where Ben faces real threats, where we actually feel the weight of his life as a hero. That's why reboots like Omniverse in 2016 series get so much backlash. The first 3 versions of Ben 10 had stakes. They show the real dangers of being a hero, but every time Ben gets real development, the next series just resets anything, and that lack of progression, yeah, it's frustrating. Now, let's talk about the continuation of Ultimate Alien, Omniverse. Technically, Ben is supposed to be around 16 in this series, but let's be honest, he looks way younger than that. But back to the story. After years of saving the world from alien invasions, magical threats, and all kinds of weird stuff, Ben finds himself at a turning point. Gwen and Kevin tell him they're leaving. Gwen is heading off to college, and they want to do some traveling before that. So, in true Ben 10 fashion, he decides to go solo. But Grandpa Max quickly shuts down that idea, introducing Ben to his new partner, Rook. Rook is a young and skilled, inexperienced player plumber who wants to team up with Ben to fight new threats. Things start picking up when we meet Kyber, but let's put a pin on him for now. He'll be more important later. But instead, our first major villain is none other than Dr. Animal, who, brace yourself, comes up with a master plan to turn every ant on Earth into a giant, mind-controlled army. Yeah, that's the plan. Naturally, he fails and lands himself in jail again. And that raises the eternal question, who's the biggest failure, Dr. Animal or Vilgax? I mean, Vilgax survived multiple explosions. Animal, not so much. Anyway, the adventure continues, and at one point, the entire universe gets destroyed by a box of all things. Ben is forced to face reality's self-using alien X. After that mess, he takes Grandpa Max's advice and starts dating an underground alien girl. So yeah, forget about Julie. Then out of nowhere, Kyber shows up again. Ben tries to fight him, but picks the worst alien possible and gets wrecked. Turns out Kyber isn't just some random bounty hunter. He made a deal with a powerful arthropod alien, a former enemy of Ben's. Together, they create the Nematrix, a device that lets the wearer transform into the predators of Omnitrix species, and the one using it, Kyber's own hunting beast. Meanwhile, we discover that the real mastermind behind all of this just wants to prove he's smarter than Azimuth, the creator of the Omnitrix. But the best part, Azimuth doesn't even acknowledge his existence. That's gotta stink. We also learned that Azimuth is responsible for creating the galvanic macmorphs, aka upgrade species. And the red ones? Yeah, they're defective. Eventually, Ben and Azimuth team up to take down the villains.
Not one word. How about 2 words? Told you.
A while later, Kevin and Gwen return, and in the classic Ben 10 fashion, they're the ultimate Deus Ex Machina when the plot needs them to be. We also get a wild story where Kevin went to the Forearms home planet to steal the alien engine for his car, but to get it, he had to fight the daughter of the planet's leader. He won and ran away. What Kevin didn't realize is that by defeating her, he accidentally married her, and now she's back, ready to claim her husband. Then, being the great friend he is, turns into Forearm and fights in Kevin's place. He wins, but now she doesn't want Kevin anymore. She wants Ben. Luckily for him, she leaves, but not before promising to return someday. Meanwhile, Ben and Julie break up. So yeah, just erase their entire relationship from your memory. She's now dating some random blonde guy. The funniest part, Ben spends the entire show flirting with other girls, but a moment it happens to him, he loses his mind. Then, his Aiden ex-fiance returns, beats up everyone, and decides to leave him alone. Meanwhile, on Dalvin Prime, Kyber and Dr. Psychobles, the crab guy, try to kill Azimuth. But before things go south, Azimuth teleports Ben and Rook there, kicking off another big battle. At one point, the red upgrade nearly takes control of Ben, and guess who saves the day? Grandpa Max. Again, with the help of everyone, Ben manages to win, and the adventure continues. Vilgax reappears, this time locked up, and honestly, this is the worst design they've ever given him. There's even a theory that every time Vilgax gets blown up, a clone or a descendant replaces him. Of course, he escapes, because it's Vilgax. After more battles, Ben gets ambushed by Kyber and Dr. Psychobos. Again, but with Grandpa Max and again backing him up, he pulls through. Eventually, Ben teams up with Heather to fight off some old enemies. This leads to one of the most craziest plot lines. Ben gets thrown into a reality where multiple versions of themselves team up to kill him. And it's awesome. Turns out the mastermind behind it all is Vilgax, who has partnered with Eon. Vilgax wants to control all versions of Ben, but Eon's true motive, still unclear. We then learn that the Ben in this reality is the only version without an Omnitrix, making him unpredictable. Naturally, they want to erase him. Just when things look bad, future Ben, Professor Paradox, and a whole squad of alternate Bens, and even a version of Gwen shows up to help. Vilgax, realizing he's about to lose, sets off a bomb that wipes out all realities except the one where Ben has no Omnitrix. It's a brutal moment, but it leads to one of the best lines in Ben 10. It's just a watch. I'd still be a hero without it.
So, what do we do now?
Then, from that timeline, then takes the Omnitrix and, with Professor Paradox, sets out to fix everything. They travel back to the very beginning to ensure the Omnitrix ends up in the hands of the original Ben. And in doing so, they reset everything, including Vilgax's timeline, reviving every good Ben and sending the bad ones back to their own world. Main Ben gets his watch back and defeats Vilgax, restoring order to the universe. But then, things get messy. Out of nowhere, the show rewrites a bunch of lore, revealing that Kevin was never an Osmosian and his father was never Grandpa Max's partner. Turns out, these were all false memories implanted by a secret plumber unit called the Rooters. While Kevin was trapped in a null void, they experimented on him, along with other humans, giving them alien powers. And suddenly, Osmosians, not a real thing. They also mess with Grandpa Max's memories, making him take care of Kevin because they believe he'd be important for the future. And of course, they eventually come back to take Kevin for their own plans. Gwen rallies everyone who went through these experiments, and they decide Ben should stay out of it. Why? Because it turns out Ben is the threat they were trying to stop. The Rooters believe the Omnitrix is too dangerous and should never have been created. Forget the countless times Ben saved the universe. They brainwash Kevin into attacking Ben, but in the end, Kevin breaks free and helps defeat them. And then, more chaos. chaos. Maltrent is unleashed, shuts down the Omnitrix and tries to rewrite time itself. Then Kyber steals the Nematrix, only to get betrayed by his own ally. Paradox shows up, future Ben appears, and the final battle begins. In the end, Ben sacrifices himself to stop Maltrent. But, thanks to the plot armor, he doesn't die. Despite the messy retcons, Omniverse did a great job at expanding Ben's personality and the huge alien universe. Flaws and all, it was all a wild ride. And what truly wrapped up the entire Ben 10 universe was Omniverse, which gave the franchise a proper ending.
See what I did there? Go me! It's my birthday!
Ben!
Dude, it's not really my birthday.
Guys, honestly, I'm not gonna waste my time, or yours, breaking down this so-called Ben 10 reboot. After everything I've already covered about the classic Ben 10 and how the story wrapped up nicely all the way through Omniverse, I think you've got everything you need to understand the Ben 10 universe 100%. The reboot, unfortunately, adds almost nothing of real value. In fact, it does the opposite. So why do I refuse to talk about it in detail? First off, the entire style is completely dumbed down. It was made for a much younger generation, and Cartoon Network oversimplified the whole concept. Want an example? There are random fights against the most absurd enemies like giant beavers riding motorcycles. There's zero attempt at coherence or any real continuity. On top of that, the characters lost all their depth. Ben doesn't even care about keeping his identity a secret. Grandpa Max turned into a clueless old guy who barely does anything, which is a huge downgrade from all previous versions where he was an absolute badass. And the plots? They just come out of nowhere and disappear by the next episode. There's no real connection, no impact, and definitely none of that sense of progression we loved in the original series. And yeah, I know they tried to introduce an actual story arc toward the end, with new transformations and twists like Ben turning into an alien from Vilgax's species. But let's be real, none of that saves the narrative. Most of it is still just isolated, consequence-free episodes. You know how classic Ben 10 had seasons that built on each other, evolving the characters and making the story more complex? Yeah, none of that happens here. In short, the reboot is just a sea of filler episodes, forced jokes, and writing choices that don't match what we know and love about the franchise. So rather than ruining our memory of what made Ben 10 great, I'd rather not even acknowledge this reboot. It's a mess, and honestly, it adds nothing to the overall story. With that said, our recap of the original saga up through Omniverse is all you need to fully understand the plot, the real characters, and how everything unfolds. If you want to stick with what made Ben 10 legendary, just stick with the 4 canon series. As for the reboot, like I said, it's just not worth it. So let's skip that part. Sound good? Alright, that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. See you in the next one.